Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock and let's go over what happened today and what we can expect moving into next week. So if you enjoyed, please don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, my thoughts on the charts, updates, etc., well, I do share my thoughts with my members on YouTube. It's a YouTube membership. The link is down below for just $3 a month, by the way, or you can press the join button beside the subscribe button. I'm constantly sharing my thoughts, post updates with my members every single day. The market is open constantly. Again, for just $3 a month, mainly on Tesla stock, or $5 a month includes the second tier, which also includes NVDA stock, constant updates, again, as the market is trading, technical analysis, ideas and stuff like that, options flow, etc. So again, link below. But jumping into it, Tesla closing the day up actually 2.4%, closing at $287 and change compared to the market. You can argue is roughly more or less in line to the market, maybe a slight underperformance, but pretty much in line with the market, as the QQQ is up yet another substantial amount. Now, the market is doing something very interesting. If I can, while I kind of yap over here, I'm looking for something to show you guys a bit of a statistic, if you will, on this market performance in terms of the indexes and how they're rocketing. It should be anywhere around here. I think this is too far. Hopefully I can find it. I should have brought this out before I did this, but I can't find it. Anyways, I'm sure you'll have to just believe me when I say this, but essentially the market right now, the QQQ and SPY, they're doing something that they haven't done in quite some time, which is essentially, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's the 9th day in a row that they are up. Here it is. This was May 1st, by the way. This was yesterday, so today's another day. But today the S&P is up, on track to be up 8 days in a row, while under its 200-day moving average. Should we get a small pullback soon? And there's another statistic that said that today was the 9th day. I don't think we've had a 9th day for like a decade now or something like that. So we're in pretty, once again, uncharted territory in a sense, because again, the market has just been on an absolute tear with this rally over here, especially ever since it broke this red line downtrend. So, there's a lot of factors here that are suggesting that, the market is pretty overextended, short term, the market is definitely a little bit more on the overextended side, which obviously can compare or can influence Tesla stock for the most part, because obviously if I bring this out, you can see QQQ right up to that 200 daily moving average, like almost to perfection. SPY not too far from it as well. So looking at these kind of stats, it's a little bit on the more concerning side in a sense, right? So you want to watch out for that, right? We are, if there's a place to get some serious resistance, we're pretty much there, is what I'm trying to say. So let's watch how that reacts. And again, the reason I bring this up is because it can affect Tesla stock naturally, right? Indirectly or directly. So going to Tesla stock though, specifically, also 200-day moving average, we are getting also rejected by it. We're pretty much following the cues right now. You can see we've pretty much been getting rejected by it almost all week, right? Consistently getting rejected by it the whole time. Every time I come up to it, we're getting smacked back down. So that's number one, right? So we are seeing some major resistance at this lower-ish 290s, right? Come up every single time, and we keep getting that rejection right here too. So watching for that, of course, naturally. Now, because I think this market is very overextended, it is on its 9th day in a row of consecutive up days. I think that's already setting a record for the past decade or something like that. Again, there was a stat I completely forgot off the top of my head, but it is setting some level of records here. And if we go for a 10th on Monday, that is actually like pretty unprecedented. So we'll see how that plays out, which is why, it's one of those things where how much more can it go without an actual pullback, right? And again, another thing I like to look at with the market, which again influences Tesla, is it's very far away from its market bias. You don't usually get this far away up or below without, getting close to a bottom or a top, at least for the short term. So same on Tesla stock, you can see it is also pretty far away, right? You can see if I zoom out over here, anytime it's gotten, obviously this was a historic sell-off, but once it finally stopped, when it was too far away, it retracted back, or it reverted to the mean. Up here, reverted to the mean. Down here, reverted to the mean. Down here, reverted to the mean. And now we're up here. Wouldn't fully shock me if we get a mean reversion once again, potentially even early next week, right? Especially as long as we continue getting rejected up at this kind of mid to low 290s. So that's kind of more the daily perspective, right? Again, I just want to make this very clear. I do still think the daily and even the weekly actually still look pretty good, right? I want to make this very, very clear. I still think the daily and the weekly overall still suggests to me that sometime this month now in May, we should see, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see about 320. That wouldn't shock me whatsoever to see somewhere in the 320s roughly, give or take, of course, sometime this month. I don't know when. Could just be starting on Monday next week. Could be the week after that. Could be the week after that. I don't know when. I'm not here to try to predict the market in the sense of like timing. That's impossible. Nobody knows when. But I do feel confident to say that it would surprise me more than not if we don't see it. You know what I mean? So just watch for that. I just want to make that very clear, because what I'm going to go into next is going to be bearish. But I want to make it clear that that's just short term. Overall, though, for the month of May, even with the short-term bearishness potential I'll go over right now, I still think it looks pretty good on the weekly and the daily, which I'll go a bit more on the weekly very, very soon. Let's go to the 1 hour chart quickly though. 1 hour chart, what is it telling us? Well, the 1 hour chart is very interesting. We actually arguably had a false breakout right here. So 1 hour chart is in this bull flag, right? This massive bull flag, which you can see the daily got rejected at as well, right? But you can see kind of more zoomed in on the 1 hour time frame where the MACD still crossed bearish, right? Despite this update today, look what the MACD did. What did it do? It still couldn't cross. It still couldn't cross, right? So that to me is still showing me some levels of buyer exhaustion. Sometimes, especially stocks like Tesla, they really make you second guess things, right? They really make you think, maybe it's not though. What if it's not though? Like, what if this is it? Like, what if it's about to rally? Right? So sometimes, it will make you second guess it, right? It's not an easy game, right? This is not an easy game, which is why emotional control is very important in this game, right? It's extremely, extremely important because, these are the kind of situations that kind of happen. Like these situations right here where it's very easy to get bulled up, right? It's very easy to get bulled up just to get trapped. You got to be very cautious, right? But again, when I see the MACD like this, is still, despite us moving up here, and it still couldn't cross back to green, it makes you kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit, it makes you kind of wonder, is this really just seller or buyer exhaustion? So that's something to note. But because I view this currently as of right now, especially while we continue to remain below this sort of 293 to 295-ish range all the way up here, I will start viewing this as unfortunately a false breakout, which unfortunately is bearish. So that as of right now, and especially while below 293 to 5, I do still continue leaning that there is a higher chance, in my opinion, to head down to the bottom end of this descending channel, especially with this potential false breakouts to the bottom end of the spectrum, which again could bring us to the 260s, right? Depending on how quick it happens. Could be high 260s, could be mid 260s, could be low 260s. It really just depends on how fast it decides to happen, right? So I'm not going to give you the exact number. Obviously, it's not like, it's going to go down to 263.49. Exactly. No, that's stupid. No one does that. If anyone does that, they're clowns, right? The point is the fact that it's to give you an idea, at least from my perspective, where can it roughly go? What's the rough area that it can revisit, right? And the rough area you can revisit, again, depending on how quick or slow it happens, 260s, somewhere around the 260s, right? Either to the bottom of this trend line, or if it takes too long and let's say it comes up towards like the end of the week, and let's say we extend these lines a little bit further down like this. So let's extend this down like this, right? Extend this down like this, something like that, right? Give or take. And if this happens, let's say towards the end of the week or something like that, like Thursday, yeah, that's low 260s. So it just depends on how quick it happens, how fast, how slow does it happen? Does it just go straight down? Does it just kind of, ease its way back up and like this and then go straight down? You don't know for sure, right? Nobody knows. But the point is the fact that especially with the false breakout, and while we're still essentially clearly contained within this downward channel / bull flag, I will expect it to continue playing as such until truly proven otherwise, which unfortunately today was a good shot at it. Unfortunately, the bulls couldn't clutch it, and this so far to me looks like a pretty nice bull trap. Again, this was a bull trap, this was a bull trap, this was a bull trap, a lot of bull traps over here. So let's watch for it. Obviously, if we break 293 to 295, then obviously we continue higher, right? Naturally, right? That is kind of that threshold. Like if you're a bear and you're short Tesla right now, in my opinion, not financial advice, 293 to 295, a break above that is kind of like the stop loss, roughly, in my opinion, right? That's where you would really want to be a little more careful on the shorter side, on the bearish side of things, right? But as of right now, as long as it's below that, I do think the bears have the upper hand still. Short term, again, I just want to make it clear, short term, the daily and weekly still look pretty good to me overall, despite the short term pain potentially coming. But again, combine that with my current outlook on what I just explained on SPY and QQQ on the daily charts, right? Both at 200 daily moving averages, both pretty extended from the market bias. Just all these factors together tells me that theoretically there should be downside coming next. Like that should be the next play for the market, right? So let's see. But that's kind of how I view Tesla right now moving forward into next week. Really, probably the first good portion of next week, I would argue. Let's go over to the weekly to finalize things over here very quickly. The weekly, like I said, daily and even the weekly, they actually still look pretty good, right? Even if we make our way lower, it still looks fine to me because number one, ideally we make our way lower earlier in the week so that at the end of the week we can still technically fix the candle, hopefully, right? And it can look pretty bullish. And what I mean by bullish is essentially as long as the weekly candles continue looking like they're turning this area right here into demand as opposed to supply, like you can see back here, it obviously very obviously supply. Now you can see this week, for instance, it clearly turned it into a demand zone, right? Naturally. So as long as we can continue making the weekly candles look something roughly like that, even if we get that dip to 260s, ideally earlier in the week than possible, or is better, because then we can still get that last 2 days of the week pump and still make the weekly candle look pretty sexy. MACD still looking pretty good, but yeah, I do like the fact that the weekly is visibly turning this area that was obvious support or resistance slash supply into obvious support slash demand. That is a good sign. That's a good start. So I still think the outlook overall looks pretty good. The weekly reversion is still sitting all the way up here. It'll move down a little bit starting next week, but that's still sitting around the 320s roughly. And I still view that as the main target. I do still think Tesla will come around there somewhere in this month. That is still my main target. That is still my main projection. But yeah, let's see how that goes, right? And if things really get bad, then closer to 260, maybe even peaking our head into the high 250s is my lower target. If things get a little bit uglier than expected, or we get like a false breakdown, for instance, right? Instead of getting a false breakout, what if we make our way down and get a false breakdown like this, right? That would be that kind of peaking our head into the 250s, technically a possibility. So just keep that in mind. But essentially, all I'm saying is I still short term, again, just potentially just next week or even a part of next week, I do lean bearish. I do still lean to the downside. I still think there's more higher chance of pain than not. And technically speaking, the risk reward for the bears here is a little bit higher than not, because even if you're a bear and you're in the stock shorting it, a stop loss above 295 is a pretty decent risk reward, as opposed to buying here and you're pretty much banking on this having to break, right? But it's like, why wait for that as opposed to just let it happen and then buy? You know what I mean? Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, let's take a quick look at options flow and see if anything's interesting happening over here on Tesla stock. Pretty mixed flow throughout the day. Actually, you can see nice bullish flow to start the day. We got that pump, and then of course, as we got that pump into the 290s, you can see a lot of bearishness came in for next week, right? So a lot of puts came in for next week right over here. So clearly people are betting on downside. I can't say I'm too opposed to that in a sense. I do think that is the more likely outcome. A nice 800K came in over here for 277.5 strike for next week. Also a put. It all does roughly line up with what I personally see happening next week as well. So let's see how it actually plays out. But yeah, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow or Monday. Peace.